Welcome back, everybody. Well. There's been a few occasions this year. Definitely after the Euros, definitely after Silverstone, and obviously after Brazil and after Saudi Arabia last week, where I thought you can't really, in terms of drama, in terms of how excited I was to put these videos out for you, I didn't think it could get any more dramatic. I didn't think, okay, there's going to be something else that's going to come. Obviously, back in however long, I didn't really think the championship would go down to the last race. I do remember, I can't remember exactly what I said, I should probably go back and find it. But there was a race, I think it was after America, or just before America, where I did the last 6 races preview. And I thought, if those three win, we might be getting close. And a few times, everyone's kind of said, imagine if it goes down to the last race. Imagine if it could go down to the last lap of the last race and someone's chasing someone down. I'm pretty sure I did say that. I'll have to go back and find it. But we got what we wanted. Did we? I don't know. I'm still in shock. I'm still in shock. I think a lot of the world, not most of the world, a lot of the world is probably still working out what actually happened, because there's a lot to digest from a sporting, moral, legal, and sort of the kind of the one that I'm kind of focusing on more is sort of it's really hard to describe, just the general feeling, general public feeling. And that's another one which kind of does tie into some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about later on. So obviously, as you're well aware, without further ado, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Formula One, season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, happened on the weekend. Unless you're living under a rock, which you weren't, because you're watching this video, and I thank you for that, you will know that was the final race. The championship standings were like this. We had Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen tied, and then Mercedes had a comfortable lead, to be fair, in the Constructors' Championship. The Constructors' Championship was the one in the build-up. I think people weren't really talking about it. The Constructors' Championship is the one where the money's getting paid out. So the millions and millions and millions of pounds and dollars and euros gets paid out based on the constructors, not the drivers. The drivers are just for prestige, just kind of like more of an individual thing. But realistically, from a business point of view, from a balance sheet point of view, teams want to get as high as possible in the Constructors' Championship. So that was looking like Mercedes were going to wrap that one up, barring like a double DNF. But it was obviously the drivers that everyone was talking about. So fast forward to last weekend, the first story, the biggest story, was definitely the new track layout. Now, showed you last week the new track layout. This is where it is again. Now there was the edited versions for this year. So they've been racing there since I think 2009. And it's been the same layout, and it's always been, if you were new to Formula One this week, it's always been one of the worst tracks for racing and overtaking. It's just terribly boring. Partly to do with the fact most championships are finished by then, so the racing isn't that intense. But they decided over the last year to revamp it, to change it. So they've changed turn 5, which is, as you can see over there, turn 5, turn 9, and then that 13, 14, 15 complex right in the middle. So turn 5 used to be a little chicane, and then that back straight was still there. So this was basically designed to help people have one sweeping movement, follow closer on the exit, and then have a better run down to turn 6. Now that turn 6, 7, 8 was still, that little section was still there before, and they've now made, they've got rid of another chicane at the end of turn 9. And they've made that another actual banked corner. Then in that middle section under the hotel, that was always very, very difficult because it's off camber, so it slides away, and there's a very tight left-right section. So they've made that a little bit wider for a little bit easier you can run through. Now obviously that happens to be the place where there was 3 crashes. So turned out to not help too much, but it's still, the idea was there. So practice came along. Well, practice was kind of as expected. Mercedes were quite good. Red Bull had some good long run pace. I think the gist was Mercedes were there. It wasn't too much of a surprise. Now, qualifying was where it got interesting. I think qualifying is going to be something that the way that played out kind of set the tone. Like for me personally, it set the tone. So qualifying one, Hamilton and Bottas, strong, right up there at the top. Everyone's thinking, okay, this is going to be a front row lockout for Mercedes. Q2, if you weren't already aware, the fastest time you set in Q2, whatever tyres you use, you have to start the race on. So Q1 is kind of another practice, really. It's a case of don't end up in the bottom 5, don't get knocked out early. Just, if you're a fast car, just get around the lap, do a fast time and get out of there. The Q1 is essentially for the really, really slow teams to see if they can, get a little bit higher up or pull a lap out of nowhere and end up in Q2 or something. But Q1's a bit of a practice. Q2 is where it really starts. And Q2 they've decided, right, whatever tyre you use to set your fastest time in this section, you have to start the race on. So typically, you obviously normally use a medium tyre because that's normally a tyre you want to go into the race and have less pit stops. So and certainly that's the case in this track. So Mercedes went out, set their 2 fast times on the mediums, as expected. Now, the kind of the commentary and the sort of the narrative at that point was Red Bull, if they do the same thing, they're not going to beat Mercedes. So there was an idea that Verstappen specifically might go on the soft tyres to try and make sure you start the race on faster soft tyres so you can get away off the line quickly and lead, and then you can kind of dictate the pace. It would be difficult because the soft tyres are going to run out about 6 or 7 laps earlier. So it's always going to be difficult. Now, this decision was made for them because Verstappen went out on his medium tyres, set his fast time, and then went out on another lap and locked his tyres up, locked his front left, made a mess of his tyre. So if he started the race on them, he'd be in a really bad position because you get a lot of vibrations and it'd be terrible. So then they decided to put soft tyres on both Verstappen and Perez and go out and set those times and basically say to everyone, right, we're going to start the race on soft tyres. So for Verstappen, he didn't really have a choice because if he started on those medium tyres, not only are you on a tyre that Mercedes is a bit quicker than you anyway, you're on a tyre that you've actually ruined, you flat spotted the tyre, so you're unlikely to do even as badly as you thought you were going to. You're going to do a lot worse than that. But the reason why I think it's a bit not suspicious, the reason why I think they might have done that anyway is because they did that with Perez. Now, I think there's no use having Perez on fast tyres because he's not going to get past Hamilton off the line. He might, but I think that kind of tells you they were thinking about doing it anyway. Verstappen made a mistake then, which is quite important to know. He did make a mistake, but I think they were going to do it anyway. But it was kind of made easier for them. So that was the first thing everyone's thinking, okay, wow. So Q3 comes along, it's top 10 only, everyone's going to go for pole position. Now, another Red Bull, the theme of this whole weekend, as you definitely guessed by now, is the theme of this weekend where Mercedes had the pace and had the upper hand. Red Bull were the ones rolling the dice, and I think that's important to note because this was the theme until the very, very, very last lap. So Red Bull were always willing to roll the dice. I think that's important to say from the get-go, and it deserves to be applauded. And Mercedes is something to look at because if they had rolled the dice a few more times, as we're going to get into, things would have definitely gone differently at various stages. So this was another occasion. So this was, bear in mind Q2, that was Red Bull rolling the dice number 1. Red Bull rolled the dice again before qualifying was even over. Q3, everyone's going for their fast laps. Perez, at no point of the weekend has slipstreams been mentioned. I think you probably thought about slipstreams, but I don't think no one actually mentioned it as an actual option like they do with Monza or Sochi or anywhere like that. But out they go. Perez and Verstappen in front. Perez is in front of Verstappen. He gives Verstappen a great slipstream down the 2 back straights, sets an unbelievable lap time. Hamilton and Mercedes choose not to do that. So they had the option twice to do that, and they chose not to. The first time, they kind of got surprised by it. Verstappen went out and beat them by half a second, and that was, Mercedes weren't going to be able to beat that by themselves. So they had a chance with their last timed lap to send Bottas out there and Hamilton behind him. They chose not to do that, which to me is just an error. I mean, this is going to be a theme throughout this video. That was an error. It wasn't even just Red Bull rolled the dice. I said you probably should have sent them out and tried to go for a slipstream there, just to try and get pole or whatever it was. So they ended up getting second with Hamilton by 3 tenths. And it ended up being exactly what Red Bull wanted, but at the same time, everybody was aware. And I think if you'd asked the entire grid, most people who are watching it that were aware would have told you that, yes, Verstappen's on the quicker tyres, therefore, in theory, you should get off the line faster and be, not off into the distance, but you should have a lead. But Mercedes have a faster car on the tyres that you want to be on for that race. So whilst they're not going to lead into turn 1, after that, it's not going to be... You're going to have to pull something out of the hat to kind of keep that momentum if you're Red Bull. So going to bed, you're thinking, this is going to be... I mean, first of all, Hamilton Verstappen on the front row again. The title decider in the desert. Everyone, the whole world's watching. You got Usain Bolt on the grid. You got Patrice Evra. You got movie stars. It's like... This is it. This is game. This is literally game time. And you've got Verstappen on fast tyres on pole, and Hamilton on slower but more durable tyres on the second. And Bottas somehow ended up way back there. You had Carlos Sainz in there. You had Perez hanging around up near the front. Bottas was the one. Bottas is the one I was looking at. I was thinking, how on earth? I've heard some stuff. I haven't dug too much into it, but I believe they put an older engine into there because they had some reliability issues. So that would make sense, because obviously why would Mercedes be that far back given the race pace that Mercedes ended up showing? So this video is going to be broken down into bits so it's easily digested. That was the first kind of bit. The next most important bit is obviously the race. So obviously, given what the grid was looking like, it was very much set up for... I mean, turn 1 was going to be insane because Hamilton was on the inside, Verstappen was on the outside, and we're going left. So technically, if they both got to the corner at the same time, Hamilton's on the inside, and it's going to be... I mean, people were thinking contact was definitely possible in turn 1. However, off the line, Hamilton, for the second race in a row, and probably for the 4th race start in a row, bear in mind they had 3 race starts in Saudi, roasted Verstappen off the line. Verstappen had a bad start. Hamilton was up and past Verstappen before. It's a short run down to turn 1. Hamilton's already passed him. And from there you're thinking, okay, cool. There's a little lock up going into the first turn, runs a little bit wide, carries on, keeps momentum, down into turn 4, holds the lead. It looked like he made a bit of a mistake. Verstappen's quite close behind him. Hamilton kind of weaves over to the left. We'll talk about weaving later. Weaves over to the left. Verstappen is quite far back. I mean, we've seen Verstappen. If you watch this video, you know what Verstappen's doing. Verstappen is quite far back. I mean, when I was watching it live, I was thinking, okay, cool. The gap's quite big. By the time Hamilton decides to brake and turn in, Verstappen has sent it again. I said last week, sent it with a capital S. And to be fair, it was a send. It was a send. It was a great move as a send. Sends it all the way down the inside. Hamilton, you see, I don't know why he isn't expecting it. This is, again, another mistake I think Mercedes, or specifically Hamilton, made. He turns, but then he backs out of it because Verstappen's there. So he runs wide. So Verstappen's kind of, similar to Brazil, but not quite the same because Verstappen stayed within the tracks. And I've been watching a lot of stuff and speaking to people, and a lot of them were like, oh, he stayed in the track. So this time he stayed within the limits. The other 3 times he hasn't, and they've penalised it, not penalised it. So this time he stayed within the things, but Hamilton's been pushed wide. Now Hamilton cuts the chicane and goes off. And I think everybody, whether you're a Formula 1 fan or not, could see, wait a minute, this guy's further ahead than he was before. That's a fact. That's undeniable fact. So Hamilton was off a good bit in front. Now, the quote from Michael Masi. So we don't hear what happens in the interim. The next thing we see, to be fair to the stewards at that point, only 2 laps later. So at the start of lap 3, it flashes up on the screen. No investigation necessary. Red Bull jump on the phone to Michael Masi, and this is another thing. I think I won't go too much into it because there's so much other stuff. But this is one thing I might do in my little wrap up at the end of the season, or the next video is coming out. This communication with the director needs to stop, 110%. Because first of all, if you're talking about it being good for, or general things being good for TV, that's going to turn more people off, new fans off. Because if you're hearing grown men complaining to the referee essentially, oh, we need this, we want this kind of penalty, you shouldn't do that, you should do. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that Formula 1 never really had, is that kind of bickering and that kind of like bargaining. But this year, like I said earlier, I think they started in Monaco, where they had the teams talking to the actual race director. And the problem with that is the race director isn't exactly like head teacher, my way or the highway. He's kind of like a bit, it's not really a knock on him, Michael Masi, but he's not exactly like, this is my decision, that's it. He's kind of like back and forth. And so Michael Masi told the Red Bull delegate all the advantage was given back prior to the end of lap 1. He forced him out there, he being Verstappen, and the other him being Hamilton, obviously. So Verstappen forced him out there, and that's why we told him to give back the advantage he gained. So the rules state, if you go off track and gain an advantage, you have to give the place back. So I think most people, Martin Brundle on commentary wasn't happy about it. The general tone of Crofty, the lead commentator for the next 20 laps, also told me that they weren't happy about it either. Generally speaking, like my personal opinion on it is, again, where do we want to apply the rules and where do we want to follow them to the letter of how they're written in the book? Because to me, that particular situation, Hamilton was in front. Hamilton was quite a way in front. The only reason why Verstappen was there with him in the corner is because he sent it down there from nowhere into a gap that would have disappeared if Hamilton had actually taken the corner like he should have. But he sees Verstappen coming, he's like, well, I don't want any part of this. And you see on the onboard, Verstappen ends up like there. The corner's going, but he ends up there. Hamilton goes off the track, gains an advantage, gives back. Like, this is another fact. I did say he went off and gained an advantage. He gave the advantage that 3/4 of, even the most hardened of or Hamilton haters or whatever you want to call them, would say that, yeah, he didn't give it all back, but I would say he gave back a fair bit of it. He didn't give it all back. Typically in those situations, you give the place back. I don't understand why they didn't give the place back. Michael Masi decided, as he will do later on, to let them race. So if we're not happy with that, we can't be happy with the whole thing. And I think all of it that's the reason why this whole thing has become an issue, because it's so inconsistent. And this is Michael Masi's own fault, based on how he dealt with Verstappen at turn 4 in Brazil. If that was handled properly, most of Saudi Arabia wouldn't have happened, and this turn 1 wouldn't have been an issue. It turns out that this turn 6 didn't even matter in the end. And there's so many incidents that kind of come later on that actually don't even matter, because the end thing happened how it happened. So this kind of was a thing that sort of resolved itself in the end, because Hamilton had the gap back down to about 1.1 seconds, which is somewhat about, I'll probably say about 2 or 3 tenths above what he had before. So he had more of a gap than he should have had. I think just to resolve this particular incident, as I think we all saw, the pace was there. Whether or not he would have been able to overtake Verstappen, the tyres would have gone off. All of those are kind of variables, but in my eyes, yeah, Hamilton did benefit from this for sure. He benefited from it. Is it that egregious? I don't think so. Did the stewards make an informed decision based on what they saw? I believe so. I believe they looked at the incident going, Hamilton kind of gave back most of it. Listen, let's just carry on. If we swap them back, first of all, Verstappen wasn't in front, so we can't swap them back, because I don't think, in my personal opinion, Verstappen wasn't in front, so why would you give him the place? He went off because Verstappen pushed him off. So I think based on overall balance, depending on who you're with and if you're level-headed, I think you'd come to the conclusion that, yeah, he gained 2 or 3 tenths at most. Race on. That's what I would personally say, but that is what it is. Then it kind of went into a sort of not a holding pattern, but then we saw Hamilton's pace. So for the next 17 laps or so, the pace kind of like picked up. They had a pit stop as well. The pace was there from Hamilton. Hamilton built up a big gap. He's about 6 seconds ahead at one point. Starts stretching out. They both pit. The gap is still there. Then the next big incident, around about lap, when it starts to become obvious, and I was aware of it, around about, after they both pitted, and I realised Perez was first, about 10 seconds down the road. That's when this next section is going to come up. The Perez overtakes. So lap 20, well, is about lap 19 where it became obvious Hamilton's going to, start coming up to Perez in a minute. And hilariously, we hear on the radio Perez's engineer saying, we're going to hold up Hamilton. We didn't hear what else he said. I don't know what else he put on there, but he said, right, plan B, we're going to hold up Hamilton. Now, where I was sitting there thinking, right, Hamilton's got an 8.5 second lead over Max at this point. Cruising. I mean, we're at lap 20 of 58. 8.5 second lead. They're both pitted. So technically, Hamilton's just running to the end on these tyres and he's clearly shown he's got the pace to beat Max. So Max was kind of like, waiting for a miracle at that point. And Perez kind of was this miracle. And I mentioned earlier about that initial turn 6 incident between Max and Lewis, kind of going Lewis's way. To me, for the fans, from a sort of a justice point of view, this, if there was any leftover thing, this killed it. This was like, right, cool. Now, technically Hamilton came out of this worse as in terms of net effect, but Verstappen definitely gained back however aggrieved he would have been to not get that place of Hamilton. This definitely neutralised it, because Perez, for the next 2 laps, I mean, we saw it in Turkey when Hamilton tried to overtake Perez and Perez made it very difficult. So I think there's only 3 drivers on the grid that I would be concerned if Hamilton was coming to overtake and they were told to defend. Perez would be the 3rd in terms of rank. Number 2 would be Alonso, and number 1 would be Verstappen. So those 3 would get very elbowy. I mean, not necessarily dirty, but I guess elbowy kind of is dirty, because unless you're trying to drive the track as fast as you possibly can, you're going to get elbowy. So they're the 3 probably most difficult drivers to overtake. So Perez had absolutely nothing to lose. So if he crashed the car, there was one moment where they came close. But anyway, Hamilton kind of lined him up into turn 6. So they come out of turn 5, and they're like, all right, cool, down the back straight. Hamilton overtakes him. Now Hamilton overtakes him and is ready to do this turn into the turn 6 hairpin, but he leaves the left. He just leaves it open for the second time so far. He just leaves the left side open. So he overtakes Perez, gets out in front, and Perez just goes down the inside, and then Hamilton can't turn in. So then they go left, right into the second long straight. Hamilton overtakes him again, and then once again he doesn't defend the inside. Perez dives down the inside again. At this point, we're thinking, wow, all right, fair enough. He's defended his position well. Then you can't really overtake going into the next section. Hamilton again made another mistake. I think he was too racy with him in sector 3. If he just let him go, not let him go, but hang back a little bit, he wouldn't have lost so much time. But he was trying to kind of almost overtake into 13, 14. I'm thinking, let him go. But they were kind of fighting. They were pretty much neck and neck going down the next straight. So by the way, the lead that was 8.7 was now 3.5. And that evaporated like that, because they were neck and neck with each other going into turn 1. Hamilton gets a bit left. The commentators can't believe it. Then they get down to turn 4. He tries again, doesn't get it done. Down the main straight again. They're kind of like battling through the chicane, and then they come out of this chicane, and eventually Hamilton gets past him. And I'll never forget the screen, because the timer's ticking down. The gap to Verstappen has gone from 3.8. It went from 3.8 to 1.00, and then we see the wide shot. You've got Hamilton, Perez, and Verstappen just behind them. And I think that, I could hear in the commentator's voice, that was the first time they realised the gap was, because Crofty said the gap's down to 1 second, but I don't think he actually understood what he said. If he realised the gap was 9 seconds a minute ago, now it's 1. It was when you see Verstappen behind. I think everyone that I was with was like, how on earth is he now right behind him? So Perez lets Hamilton, at that point Perez kind of gave up the chance because he was behind, gave DRS to Verstappen, who then closed right up to Hamilton within about a second or so. That was incredible. I mean, the defending, there was nothing in the Perez defense that was, wrong or illegal or over the line. It was hard racing. It was obviously defensive racing. It wasn't racing in terms of, you know, it was kind of very much, I've got nothing to lose and I know you have everything to lose. Hamilton can't afford to do anything. If this was like race 3, you know, these guys are just going to go wheel to wheel and just bang it out that way. But because it's the last race of the championship, if Hamilton and Perez clash and Hamilton ends up breaking his wing and goes off, then that's incredible. So that was all cool. I mean, that definitely for me, I mean, even though the stewards ruled that Hamilton gave back the advantage, anyone who wasn't happy should then have been quite happy because Perez has just wiped out the advantages that Hamilton had built up by having a faster car. So at that point, the kind of the racing gods, if you like, it was pretty even, if not against Hamilton. But I will admit definitely that if Hamilton was behind Verstappen, it would have been probably more difficult for him to overtake and then build the gap. So the gap was there because he was in front. So this to me leveled things out, and I've not seen this kind of, I mean, certainly not a championship decider. This, I mean, it was incredible. It was the only word. And I think definitely it got to a point where they were very close. But then Hamilton, again, one thing I will praise Hamilton for was how he dealt with that after. First of all, how he dealt with it in general, because he could have collided with him. I think if Bottas was messing with Verstappen in the same way, there would have been contact, as we all know, because of the style of Verstappen. But I think the other way around, Hamilton was, you know, his kind of leniency worked in his favour, I think, in the end, because I think if he had really gone for it, he'd have crashed. I mean, there was one point where it was that double chicane out of turn 6, I think it was, where the cutback, Perez was slow out of that corner and Hamilton could have clipped his back right wheel. He kind of almost got there, then he went in front and then he let him down the inside. So anyway, that all happened and that was extremely dramatic. And then for the next 15 laps, it was another version of what we'd already seen. So Hamilton, fastest lap, starts stretching the gap. Bear in mind, they're on the same tyres now, so it's not like Verstappen's got weaker tyres. So they start stretching this one out. Hamilton starts getting out in front. Lap 26 was the first time that I had sort of a look of, I wonder, I was kind of made aware of the perils that lay ahead. So when Raikkonen started to lose drop, he kind of hit the wall and they limped home with a dodgy wing. That was the first time I thought, wow, I mean, if these guys if there's a safety car or something like this, you're going to have to change tyres and then it's going to be back on again. So that was the first time. And then George Russell, I'll tell you what people probably, this is definitely missed. I picked this one up. George Russell lost, pretty much for the whole entire lap, he lost drive. So his car was screwed. Now, he was going to pull over. I think it was out of turn 4. After he got to the hairpin of turn 4, he starts going driving. He pulls over as if he's going to stop. And I think he reckons, because obviously he's now a Mercedes driver, I think he thinks if I pull over here, there's going to be a safety car. And I know Hamilton's out in front. I believe that's definitely what he did, because he pulled over. He was kind of moving to the left. And he lost drive. In any other race, they tend to turn the engine off and pull the car over, because you don't just limp home with a broken engine. Because it was the last race of the championship, and I think he was probably aware of what's going on, he limped it all home and got home. That was kind of like another dodged bullet, if you like. However, the final bullet was Antonio Giovinazzi. And this did actually make me laugh because of how, well, again, we don't know the ins and outs of it, but he just stopped in terms of on the racetrack, one of the worst places. Even if you're not a neutral, or especially if you are, like, where do you not want to pull over? Just on the exit of one of the fast hairpins is probably one of those places you don't want to pull over. But he pulls over there, and you can tell the commentator, because for those 30 laps, I believe they were very flat. It was kind of, when Crofty, if you notice, when Crofty kind of goes, he breathes a bit and he says a lot of ers. He's a bit flat, and I've heard it a lot because generally, obviously, when it's boring, when Hamilton wins all the time, but I do get that. I started to get that vibe from him. I was thinking, oh man, he's not happy here. His voice went up when this came up. They were like, right, this could be a safety car. This is going to change the race completely. Now, when Giovinazzi did pull over and slow down, it had to be a virtual safety car because, you know, it was only a car. It was not right near the marshal's post, or it was a little bit further on. Martin Brundle did say he's parked it a little bit outside of where the marshal's post, a long way from the service roads, what he said. So Giovinazzi slows down, and I thought it was quite a late virtual safety car as well, to be fair. Like, I saw the Giovinazzi was there on the edge, and a lot of cars went through that hairpin before they actually put the virtual safety car out. But that was, I thought, quite strange. So Max then pits for new hard tyres. Now, this obviously benefits Red Bull, and given that the lead isn't, you don't lose as much time in virtual safety cars because obviously everyone's going at the same pace. It's not quite a safety car because everyone will have to come up and join the back, but it's a lot easier than taking a regular pit stop. So you only lost about 10 or 11 seconds. So when that was all resolved, oh, another thing, Toto Wolff, again, he was a bit annoying this race, I can't even lie. He was on the phone to essentially to the referee and says, no safety car. Like, that was ridiculous. I thought that was ridiculous. When I heard that, I was like, you can't tell the race director not to put a safety car out, because that was ridiculous. I think that was probably, apart from the Red Bull one later on, that was Toto's worst moment, I think. Him saying no safety car when there's a car on track is ridiculous, no doubt about it. Like, I was thinking, you can't say that. You can't tell him not to put a safety car out because you know that would disadvantage Hamilton. Like, you might feel that internally, but you can't tell the race director, don't do that. So I thought that was quite ridiculous. So virtual safety car's in. Verstappen's pitted now. There's about 11.5 seconds he's lost. Now, after the virtual safety car sorts itself out on lap 38, the gap is about 17 seconds. And given it's lap 38, 20 laps to go, the idea is you're about 17 seconds behind. You need about 8/10 of a lap to get all the way to Hamilton, who's way down the racetrack on 23 lap older tyres. Same compound. So the hard tyre, it's not like putting a set of softs on and roasting through and gaining about 1.2 seconds a lap and then catching him. It was always going to be the hardest option, but Verstappen started hammering these lap times in. And there was at one point, I did the maths, I think it was around about about 7 or 8 laps later, the maths were looking like Verstappen was going to catch him towards the end. And they went on to Christian Horner on the pit wall, which actually, a quick segue, Christian Horner on the pit wall for the last race. Like, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, we seem to have Christian Horner a lot on the pit wall. I thought they would deliberately not have anyone on the pit wall because it's Red Bull or Mercedes. You can't go to one of them all weekend long and have his opinions on what's going on. But they did that, and it is what it is. So they went to Christian Horner. He said, what does he say? He was saying they've had the quicker car. He was very defeated. They've had the quicker car. We're going to need a miracle from the racing gods. You know, and Crofty said, once again, Red Bull are looking for something out of their control to help them. That's what Crofty said on the race. He was aware that, listen, it's now lap 46, lap 48. The laps are ticking along. You've got 8 laps to go. And the words came out of Horner's mouth, we're going to need a miracle from the racing gods. Guess what happened? Safety car. Now the scene after, it was this lap, so to set the scene, you've already seen it, but I'm just going to set the scene anyway. Lap 50, I still can't believe it's fair. Lap 53 of 58 in the final race of the championship, with the championship leader 11 seconds behind the 7-time world champion. Cruising towards a champion, towards the 8th championship. Everyone's chilling. I remember exactly what they were doing. They were explaining how far Mercedes have come. So they were watching Hamilton go through the chicane, and they were saying Mercedes pre-season testing was so bad, and then all of a sudden the screen whirls round and we see Latifi in the wall, debris all over the place. Like, that was one of the most dramatic, it definitely is, one of the most dramatic sporting moments I've ever seen. When you take into consideration, what's the only thing that could go wrong from here? Apart from Hamilton's engine blowing up, what's the only thing that could happen here? Is a safety car. Because when a safety car comes out, it brings everyone back together. Now, obviously, even if they weren't able to pit, Verstappen's on 23 lap younger tyres, and that in itself would have been a race if they had got that going. So the reason why Mercedes didn't pit is because if you pit, it's kind of a few reasons, but it's hard to know exactly. But there's a few reasons why they couldn't pit. Number one is they're obviously in front. So if they pit, Verstappen won't pit because he's got the luxury of seeing what Hamilton's doing and going, right, if you're going to be in the pits, I'm going to not go in the pits. Now, the only issue with that is if Mercedes decide to pit, they're thinking, right, there's 5 laps to go. Given the regulations as we know them, there's not going to be enough time to get out on these fresh tyres and overtake Verstappen. So that was the first thing. And secondly, you're going to give up track position, and you don't really want to have to try and overtake Verstappen anyway. If you've got the lead, keep the lead. So they had to do that. They had to be conservative. So I don't really mind that decision, even in hindsight. Well, with hindsight, if we knew what was going to happen, you'd have changed tyres. But what happened wasn't to be expected. So I think that decision was okay. Red Bull, once again, brilliantly rolled the dice. They're like, right, we'll bring Verstappen in because they had clear track. They had time to come in. They're not going to lose too many positions. So they pitted, and some other guys pitted. So for soft tyres. And I think one thing it was well, funny, I don't know if funny is the word. When they went to Hamilton's team radio, when they swear, they always bleep it out. This was the longest beep I've ever heard on Formula One radios. Normally it's like beep, blah, blah, blah. It was about 4-second beep. I don't know what he was saying, but it must have been savage. Because first of all, he had a virtual safety car, which is all right, cool, fair enough. He pits for Verstappen pitted for newer, harder tyres, chased you down. He was kind of concerned. This was like, are you kidding me? 4 laps from the end, and this guy's gone into the wall, and now Verstappen's had to pit. And he was concerned on the radio. He was like, is he going to be right behind me? He said, yeah, he will be. So at the beginning, Martin Brundle and David Croft, the commentators, knew about this overtaking rule. They were like, Brundle was like, he wasn't asking the question, but he was saying, will they let the lap runners through? And Crofty said they always let the lap runners through, which is also true. So they normally all the lap runners always go past. They all knew the procedure. I think everyone knows the procedure for lapped cars. At this point, there were 8 lapped cars. Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc and Vettel were lapped. Now, they happened on track to be between Hamilton and Verstappen. So Hamilton was in front, 5 lapped cars back to Verstappen. Now, the general gist of what was going on at this point, everyone knew, so the 2 commentators specifically were aware that after the safety car is going to end, you let all the lap cars go past the lead runner and off. The safety car goes in at the end of the next lap and off we go. Hamilton becomes a safety car, leads them off. That's the procedure that's happened every single time I've ever seen Formula One, and it's in the sport regulation. That's how it goes. So at that point, we're thinking if they let, and Bono, Lewis Hamilton's race engineer, explained that exact situation. He said they have to let all the field bunch up, so get everyone together. Then they have to let the lap cars through. So he explained to Hamilton, this is like, essentially, don't worry. This is what's going to happen. It's in the rule. There's no, they have to let these cars through. So they either let the cars through and it takes another lap, or they don't let the cars through and there's 5 cars between you and Max. And granted, they will all get out of the way, but still, in terms of literal distance, it's going to be about 400 meters between you. Max isn't going to be able to catch that up in 1 lap. So at that particular point, the fairest thing to have done would be to say, don't let any of the lap cars through, because if you let them through, you have to let all of them through, so we thought. And if you do let them all through, there's not going to be any racing. The only way they're going to get racing, and Martin Brundle also said this, the only way they're going to get racing is if they don't let the lap cars through. And that's what they said. There was a 3-lap delay though. So between when Latifi crashed and then on lap 56, so there's only 3 laps left, the message came up, lap cars will not be allowed to overtake. And I think everyone thought that was for the benefit of racing. So if they don't let the lap cars overtake, whenever we do get going, it's going to be a real race and we're not going to lose laps because you have to follow formality. That's what we thought. So at that point, everyone's kind of understanding what the rules and how they applied. In amongst all this madness, Perez retired. I don't know why Perez retired. It sounded I don't know if we might see some stuff in the week. I thought there was some strategy behind it because he said Perez has to retire the car. And Perez was like, really? Like, the confusion was evident. He was like, why? He was third in the race. He was like, why? And he was like, just you have to box the car. And I was thinking, is there any strategic gain to be benefited from getting Perez out of the way? Or just, I had no idea what was going on. Maybe there must have been, I want to try and find out what happened, because that was very suspicious, because he didn't understand. Perez was like, why? He was like, he visibly confused. Like, why on earth am I boxing now when the race is about to finish? I'm about to come third. Like, why would I box? But the engineer said, no, just do it. And no one mentioned it after the race. That there could be something in there. I don't know what it is, whether it's regulation related to, I don't know what that might be. But so after that point, they decided, so the track was clear at this point, or the track was being swept up. It's kind of clear. So at this point, we're thinking, this is lap 56. So there's only two racing, so they're on lap 56 when this happened. There's only two racing laps left. So you know, even if you say the safety car's in this lap when they cross the finish line, they have to go for another lap and it's going to end on the safety car. So at this point, we're thinking, okay, cool, that's it. Then they decided, well, then on lap 57 itself, Red Bull got on the phone. Now, this is the one that, I mean, Toto was just annoying as a bit of a whiner at the earlier point. He didn't really, I mean, he also did try, I guess, influence Michael Masi and say, don't put a safety car in. He wasn't going to do a safety car in it because that particular incident, you don't put a full safety. That's why they developed the virtual safety car, because putting a whole safety car out just for that car there would be a bit silly. This one, however, they got on the phone and said, why are we not letting these lap cars overtake? Now, I will read this exact quote. Michael Masi says, so they get on the phone and say to Michael Masi, why are we not letting these cars overtake? His response was, because Christian, just give me a second here. There was a pause. So he's there like, because, just give me a second. I'm trying to get rid of this incident. So the car being spun in the thing. Horner says, you only need one lap. Now, the conspiracy theorists amongst you, I'm not one of them on this particular case. If you've told the referee, you only need to get one lap in, and there's a possibility of you doing that, Michael Masi's now thinking, can I do that? So maybe that's what's happened, because what proceeded to follow was quite incredible. So then on lap 57, at like seconds after this, in terms of the racing, the way that the cars progressed, literally in the space of that same straight, the message flashes up, like, this is incredible. The message flashes up on the screen. Lapped cars, they did the numbers, but it was the same guys. It was Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc, Vettel may now overtake. Now, we're all trying to read this. The two commentators, Crofty and Brundle, were like, wait, Norris, but he's counting through. The next second, safety car ending. Nobody can believe what's going on. But Toto Wolff's on the phone saying, Michael, what on earth are you doing? Nobody knows why this decision has suddenly been made in half a racetrack. So now these 5 cars have gone past. Critically, I've watched and paused this back about 500 times. Now, I've looked at where all these cars are on the straight. Now, it's about, for the start of one straight, so at the end of just before turn 9, the hairpin, that's where Hamilton is. The 5 cars have already passed him at that hairpin. So you've still got 10, 11, 12, the hotel section, and then the final bit. So we're in sector 3 at this point. Ricciardo, the cars that weren't allowed to pass were Ricciardo, Stroll, and Mick Schumacher. Ricciardo and Stroll are 200 meters back at most on that straight. So if they wanted to, Ricciardo and Stroll could have probably overtaken by the hotel section. Now, Mick Schumacher was at the start of the straight. Now, depending on how quickly he went, now bear in mind Lewis Hamilton was about to break his dad's record, he might have really stepped on it. That Haas might have turned into a Mercedes real quick. He could have got up to there. It is debatable whether Mick Schumacher would have been able to pass Lewis Hamilton and get enough out of the way. So that's why they decided, right, the 5 cars between Lewis and Max, get them out of the way. Now, at the time, there's no... I find it difficult to understand, difficult to believe that the stewards and Michael Masi were aware of this Article 48.13, at this point in time. It turns out that that was the case. If it turns out that was the case, that was crazy. But there's an article in there essentially saying the race director has complete control of the safety car. So Article 48.12 says all the lap cars, any lapped cars, are required to overtake, and then the safety car goes in at the end of the following lap. So there's a rule saying they all have to go. There's also the next rule saying it's kind of up to the race director. So, I mean, you tell me, like, just in any sport or any walk of life, there's a rule to say this can't happen, but there's also a rule to say it's also this guy's discretion to apply this rule. So that rule kind of doesn't need to exist. That rule should probably get removed, and it's up to the race director to do whatever he wants, because that's essentially what's happened. He's decided, for the benefit of racing, not the benefit of any particular racer, with the awareness that Verstappen has pitted and Hamilton hasn't pitted. So he's got the information. It's not like he doesn't know who's pitted. He's aware Hamilton's leading the race. It doesn't matter that he's led the race the whole way. That's not really relevant. He's also aware that Verstappen has pitted for soft tyres. And if they let them race, Verstappen is going to win. Like, that's what's going to happen. So he was aware. He must have been aware of this at this time. He's made that decision to go, right, we want to allow racing. We want this race to finish. So at this point, it's looking like, I mean, as they crawl into the hotel section 13, 14, 15, you've got the scene of Hamilton going very, very slowly, Verstappen actually going up beside and passing. This is crucial. He got his nose in front of Hamilton, which you're not allowed to do. That's a rule break. Typically, that's looked into. But anyway, the problem with another thing I guess isn't really talked about. The problem with where Verstappen was on track to do as a racing lap. Verstappen's on the racing line. To take that next corner, you want to be where Verstappen is. So if Verstappen, one thing that isn't really being talked about is if Hamilton was where he should have been, aka if Verstappen wasn't alongside him, Hamilton would have had a run to continue what he wanted to do. But Hamilton had to get in front of Verstappen first and then take the corner. So he was on the dirty side. So that's kind of one thing that I didn't agree with in terms of what's going to happen later on, is that probably should have been taken more seriously. I get why it wasn't. Verstappen had a nose in front. It wasn't that big a deal, like, really. But where are we applying the rules literally and where are we using discretion? I think that's the problem. That's the problem that starting in Brazil, and it's followed all the way through, is that there are rules there, but we're kind of applying them as and when in the idea of getting racing, essentially for more viewers and more entertainment, which, I mean, you can have your own opinions on what happens there. So this literally sets up the most incredible end to a Formula One race in the history of Formula One. That there is absolutely, certainly the most incredible end to a championship, even above 2008, because 2008 was just a really slow car, got a bit off on the wet stuff in Brazil and Hamilton went past him. Granted, it was 2 corners from the end, but this was like, you literally couldn't make this up. You couldn't make this up. Even if you include or discount the circumstances that led to a final lap showdown between Hamilton. If you said to me, it's going to go to lap 58 in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton v Verstappen, off you go, I'd have been like, you are absolutely bonkers. Let alone Hamilton on 44 lap old hard tyres, and Verstappen's put fresh soft tyres on. So there's no way Hamilton's going to win this race from here. Like, he was doomed from as soon as they decided to let all the lap cars through, it was over. And I think at that point you're thinking, okay, this is absolutely over. Let's just see how this plays out, because Hamilton technically is leading. You could tell Verstappen had pace through 1, 2, 3, down to turn 4. Now, turn 4 was the first of 2 mistakes Hamilton made. Well, this is really the big mistake, to be fair. One was a mistake, one was brilliant from Verstappen. So Verstappen, again, sends it down the inside from a long way back. I have no idea why Hamilton didn't defend the inside from Verstappen. Verstappen sent it from a good way back, but he's got fresher, softer, quicker tyres. I saw it later on with George Russell and Daniel Ricciardo. It was on a replay when someone was giving an interview. Russell was on the right-hand side where Hamilton was. Daniel Ricciardo the McLaren was going to come on the inside. Russell blocks the inside. Granted, he's going to get roasted down the next straight, but block that move at least. So Hamilton let him down the inside. The commentators are going berserk. Now, this part, again, won't get looked at, but it was so far over the line. It was over the line, but again, it's not going to get looked at. First of all, because of who it was, and second of all, it's not really relevant. So Verstappen weaves 5 times on the straight. Now, he got a black and white flag in Brazil. I don't know how many, I can't remember how many times he weaved. It wasn't 5 though, because this was incredible. He went left, right, left on the straight. He was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, down it's a long straight, and I just couldn't believe how much he was weaving. His engineer told him on the thing, watch the weaving, because he knew, I don't know how that would be applied afterwards. Now, there was no space because he could do that weaving, there was no space for the overtake into that chicane. Now, Hamilton got up alongside Verstappen. Verstappen brilliantly blocked the inside, because that inside bit where Perez went down the inside of Hamilton, Verstappen blocked that inside brilliantly. That's where you should block on that corner. So Hamilton went round the outside. They're neck and neck going into turn 9. Forget about all the other stuff. Halfway through the racetrack, they're neck and neck going to turn 9. And obviously Hamilton isn't able to get round the outside. Verstappen leaves him out to dry. And that was basically the last chance. They end up getting round the final bend. Toto Wolff is going mad. Max is going mad. Red Bull are gone mad. Nobody can actually believe what happened and how it happened. Like, the last lap itself can be broken down to Hamilton not defending turn 4, Max weaving to stop Hamilton overtake into turn 6, and then Max brilliantly blocking the inside into turn 9. All of those 3 things put together was just the encapsulation of that lap. Man, that final lap was just... I mean, it wasn't fun watching it at the time. I mean, it was fun. I can't even lie. It was one of those moments. It was like Sergio Aguero against Man United. It was like many Super Bowls, actually, at least 2 or 3 of them. Like, there's some moments in sport where there's no kind of noise. It's just 2 people at the absolute limit thinking about nothing else, and it was just unbelievable. And immediately we're thinking, there's going to be something that this isn't over. So when all the fireworks were going off in celebration, I was thinking, there's no, like, I just don't think. Certainly, if it was the other way around, I just would not be confident, because I'm pretty sure someone made a mistake somewhere, and this result's might get overturned. But one thing I did really like, and certainly watching it back the second time, it was really nice to see how happy Max was specifically. Like, he has deserved, like, no doubt about it, he's deserved throughout the whole season. He's been unbelievable since he came in when he was 17 years old. Obviously, he had a lot more problems with his driving standards, which obviously come up this year. But I think we always knew he was going to be a champion, and I think him actually finally forgetting about how he got there, because that's kind of a second topic. But the fact he became world champion in this race by overtaking Lewis Hamilton on the last lap is just insane. And I think all the celebrations at the end were cool to see for Max. Vettel and Mick Schumacher, because Vettel and Hamilton have had a long history, and they've always been really, really sporting with each other. Obviously, Hamilton's normally come out on top, and they've always kind of had a moment. Vettel's always gone over to say something to him. So I thought that was really nice in the kind of the way bit with the FIA. Vettel was chatting, was kind of like consoling him at the end. I thought that was really, really nice, because Vettel's obviously one of the nicest guys. And then Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's dad, it was quite an emotional moment to see, because his dad was there from the very beginning. And when Hamilton was coming in 2007, 8, 9, you'd always see Anthony Hamilton there, giving his son praise, kind of helping him, all that kind of stuff. And he was straight over there, Anthony was, straight over there to Max, genuinely congratulating him. And Jos Verstappen and Anthony Hamilton had a little hug. That was a cool moment as well. Like, no matter what else happened, that was a really, really cool moment between like 2 dads who've watched their sons grow up this whole time, helped them every step of the way, and now they've just jeweled it out for millions and millions. And, you know, the sporting nature, I think that's one thing that obviously I was aware of, and I guess people who are fans of Hamilton or who are non-fanatic, should we say, against him, are aware of Hamilton's sportsmanship. And I think I'm glad that the neutrals and I guess the new fans that came in were able to see how Anthony did and how Hamilton gave his interview after. You could tell he was devastated, but he still had that kind of like calm to him that he's had throughout the season. He wasn't rattled. There's been times where he's been rattled or angry. I think there he kind of looked emotional, but he kind of held it together. And the first words out of his mouth was, first of all, congratulations to Max. So at that point, obviously he was furious with what happened initially. Toto was the one that I guess can take the brunt of that. He can be the one that's, oh, I'm furious, I'm angry. But so Lewis had to put on a brave face. And I think that he was an example of how you lose. Because I think a lot of people do it badly. A lot of people do it for entertainment. Conor McGregor. Whilst that is entertaining, at the end of the day, dealing with the way Lewis and Anthony Hamilton did is how you do it going forward. So that was really cool. And I think one thing that interesting, I don't know if it was, you know, missed. It was definitely picked up by the interview. He said, David Coulthard, I think Coulthard, no, it was Jensen Button who asked him the questions. He was asking about next year and going forward. And he says, yeah, we'll see about next year. Now that tells me he needs time to like decompress. I don't think he's obviously not going to retire now, especially with he signed a new contract for 2 more years and he's got George Russell there with him. But I think that was definitely, if there was any kind of like slip, that was it. He was kind of like, damn, I'm not sure if I want to do this again, or I don't know. You know, obviously you're very deflated. Most people do retire after bad losses, and you know, I think that was definitely one of those that was kind of interesting to me, that he was thinking maybe I might retire. But anyway, that's how it ended, or so we thought. This is where it gets legal and interesting. And at this point, I mean, obviously, given that the celebrations has happened, the trophy's been given out, the anthems have been going out, all the tears, the father and the girlfriends are all crying. Everyone's going absolutely bananas. They're interviewing Jerry Horner, formerly Jerry Halliwell, Christian Horner. They've done all this stuff, and now when that's all settled, Damon Hill, Martin Brundle, Nico Rosberg, Jensen Button, and Simon Lazenby are basically talking. They're like, right, there are obviously going to be some protests. These are those 2 protests. The first one was obviously from Mercedes, and it was over Article 48.8, which is about overtaking behind the safety car. So at that point, they'd looked through the data. I mean, even I think everyone at the time, everyone who was watching that little safety car restart was thinking, first of all, Verstappen's up alongside him, which people don't normally do. Like right up alongside, they don't normally do. And at some point, it looked like Verstappen was in front. The second protest was Article 48.12, and that was about the end of the competition. So they were basically protesting the race result, and they were also protesting the fact that they thought Verstappen had overtaken behind the safety car. Now, in theory, if a car has overtaken behind the safety car, that's a slam dunk. It's like, oh, penalty. That's typically. So on paper, that was an easier one to try and go for, because he did. That would have been a strange way to finish championship, but again, all of this is strange, so I'm not sure this is any more strange or less, but that would have been weird. So this happened, later on after the race, around 8 p.m. their time, and Mercedes said there were 2 breaches of the sporting regulations, namely which states any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required, the key word, any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. And once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will be required to return to the pits at the end of the following lap. That means on lap 57, they all pass the leader, then they do another lap. That's in the regulation. That's Article 48.12. That's literally there. So Article 48.12 literally says what everyone knew at the time. So Brundle, Crofty, they all knew. Listen, they need to get all these cars out of the way. And Bono told Hamilton this. They need to get all these cars out of the way. and then they need to do another lap. They're like, literally, maths tells you you're not going to get any racing done. So chill. That's what Hamilton was being told, essentially. Now, obviously, Mercedes said if this had been done, car 44 would have won the race. That's fact, because obviously they wouldn't have had another lap, so they would have been a lap behind the safety car. The bit that was weird is they wanted the stewards to amend the classification under the sporting code to the lap before. Now that there is precedent for that. You're allowed, when they do count back, in terms of, say, if there's something that happens, they can go, right, we're going to take the classification at the end of the previous completed lap. So, which is what Mercedes were going for. It wasn't just, we want the race changed. It's like, no, this is specifically what we want. We want the classification to be taken at the end of the lap before, which is obviously Hamilton in front. Now, Red Bull's arguments in defence was actually quite interesting, because the first one sounds like it was the first thing they thought of, because they'd read the regulations and gone, wait a minute, any doesn't mean all. Now, yes, any doesn't mean all. Now, if you said to someone, I'm probably going to butcher this, but anyone seen outside will be penalised. Like, to me, that's anyone you see outside. Let's go back to lockdown. If anyone seen outside is going to get jailed. That, by definition, to me, means everybody seen outside. Now, that doesn't mean you can go and pick 10 people that are outside and leave the others. So that was quite a funny one. That's probably the least technically sound argument they made. But the rest of the arguments did actually matter. The next one was Article 48.13, which is basically the thing that's cost, that has sort of overruled this whole thing. The very next article, after the 48.12, where it says they have to overtake the lead lap and go in after that next following one, the very next one says safety car, when the message comes up, safety car in this lap, which did come up, the signal is it will enter the pit lane at the end of that lap. Like, that is in the regulations. So whilst 48.12 does exist, and it says once the lap cars have been past the leader, the safety car goes in the end of the next lap. If that process happens, the safety car in this lap wouldn't be happening, if you're following me. So you're kind of explaining two different situations and two different regulations there. Like, normally, if procedures followed, the cars unlap themselves and that message doesn't come up. So because they rushed it and decided, no, we want these 5 instead, and those 5 had already passed, they could flash that message up and get the safety car in. So if you're following me, like, this is where it gets very, very murky. Because what they've done is, there's a regulation clearly there. 48.12 is there, and everybody knows that, and everybody knew that at the time. But there's also 48.13, which is a technicality, because if you don't and they've said, you'll see later on, if you don't follow 48.12, you can do 48.13 and basically overrule that by virtue of, well, we're following this regulation instead of that one, which is quite incredible. They're arguing, yeah, basically that overrides that one. And there's another one, which is arguably the worst one, well, the worst being the most suspicious, is there's Article 15.3, which gives the race director overriding authority over the use of the safety car. That basically says he can do literally whatever he wants. Like, literally whatever he wants. Which is kind of scary, because, I mean, first of all, it's happened here, but in a sort of different way. Like, technically, he can literally make up a rule and say, I have overriding authority over all the regulations that have been given to the teams. So this part of it, no team is going to be aware of what he's able to do. So he can make up a rule and catch somebody out. So this is the part, that part is also quite incredible. And then at the end, it says the last bit I actually noticed, and I explained that earlier, about the 8 cars in total that have been lapped, that what Red Bull are arguing is, even if all the cars had been unlapped themselves, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. I do tend to agree. I think on balance that could be true. That's the only one of these 5 arguments I would actually back, because when I looked it back, I paused it. Obviously at the time, there's absolutely no way Michael Masi would know this. No way whatsoever. In hindsight, it does work, but the decision-making process that Michael Masi went through did not include this last one. It could have, but if he had Sky Go and he's able to pause it and rewind and pause it and wait to see how many cars are in the background. But at that time, there's no way he would have known. He would have assumed, like everyone else, that it wouldn't have got to the end. Now, I think Schumacher, it depends on how fast Schumacher went and how slow the safety car went, but it's possible Schumacher could have got out of the way and they'd have got racing. But they'd have had to literally do that shortcut, which nobody thought about. This 48.13 would have had to be a thing that no one was aware that was even going to be a thing. So that is strange. And the race director, unusually, also gave evidence in this thing. And he basically said, he's kind of downplaying Article 48.12. He's saying the purpose of this was to remove the lap cars that would interfere in the racing between the leaders. Now, I don't know if that leaders part is the most relevant thing here, or if it's just racing, because technically, as we know, the Constructors' Championship, there's millions of dollars at stake. So if you're telling me that I don't know what the actual splits are, I'll definitely find that one out. If you're telling me, for example, there's $3 million on the line between 5th and 6th, and you're telling me Alpine and Toro and AlphaTauri, they're raced for $3 million, doesn't matter, I would say that was wrong. I think the leaders, whilst that's the most important thing, you can't say the leaders is the only race that matters, because why have we got a championship in the first place? Why don't you just let Max and Lewis do their own thing? So I disagree with that particular one, because he's saying, well, the only race that matters is Lewis v Max, which is true, but it's not literally true, because that's why you've got 20 cars in the race and not 2. So that bit was quite incredible for him to say that. And another thing we weren't aware of is that he's also stated this has been long agreed by the teams that where possible, it was highly desirable for the race to end in green condition, i.e. not under a safety car. That's fine. Like, in theory, that's fine. But it depends on where you say agreed by all the teams that where possible, it was highly desirable. All of that English is sort of like, well, if you'd asked Mercedes or a lot of the other teams who weren't able to pit because you've changed your mind, would they still think it was desirable to finish not under a safety car, given that you've changed your mind? Now, that wouldn't have been a thing. So they said, from here it kind of got a bit interesting, because clearly they said, the stewards have basically said, well, Article 15.3 exists, he can do what he wants. And this is the most crucial thing in this whole thing. He says that although Article 48.12 may not have been applied fully, so they've said in the document, they've not followed the rule. It's literally in black and white right there. Although the article may not have been applied fully in relation to the safety car returning to the pits at the end of the following lap, Article 48.13 overrides that. And once the message safety car in this lap has been displayed, it is mandatory to withdraw the safety car. Like, that's correct. As in the wording of that is correct. But it's just incredible if you think about it. So what they've said is, we've not followed that rule, but this rule technically, if you apply this as well, we have to take this one. Or we're going to go with this one. Because technically 48.12 is a real thing as well. They've said you have to follow at the end of the lap. But they've gone, you know what? Once we flashed up the message, and the reason why they flashed up the message is because they overrided that rule. So that message doesn't normally come up at that time in any other situation. They've rushed that message through because they've got rid of 48.12. So if they followed a normal procedure, there's no safety car in this lap, because the lap cars haven't even been overtaken yet, and the car hasn't even gone round. So the safety car would never be in that early. But they've rushed through the 5, slapped on that message, and then therefore 48.13 kicks in, and that's it. It's safety car in this lap, let's go racing. So it's still, even when you read it back, it's insane. Like, it is insane. Like the way these things have been applied is insane. And given there's a world championship on the line, it makes it even more insane. So the protest was dismissed at the end of this because of obviously those reasons. They've decided, right, all right, these are the reasons we've given. We're not going to allow this to see the light of day. What they have said at the end is they've got the right to appeal. Now that's where we're at now. As in right now, Tuesday 14th in the evening, unless something's happened while I've been filming this video, they've literally said, you've got, I believe it's 72 hours to submit this, because prize giving, I think they said, is on Thursday. So they want this kind of submitted before then, because that's technically the cutoff. So if they're not able to get that one in, then they will be able to get that one in, because obviously that's the deadline. So they've announced their intention to do that. Mercedes have announced their intention to appeal this. And I guess secondarily, the other protest that they had, they did say that having considered the various statements, they determined that although car 33 did at one stage, for a very short period of time, move slightly in front of car 44. So once again, so both of these protests, in the explanation for why they've been rejected, they've said the rule was broken. Like, can we, for a minute, take this one in? Both of these protests have gone in to say, you've done the wrong thing with the safety car, and Max overtook Lewis under the safety car conditions. The FIA have gone, you're right in both, but here it is in the rules, or here it is in our sporting regulations. This is what we're going to apply to tell you that you're somehow wrong here. So they were right. Mercedes were right. Both these protests were correct, but the FIA have found some regulations they can apply for it not to be a thing. However, this particular one isn't, like I said at the time, it's not really, they've also said they moved slightly, moved ahead of car 44 at the time when both cars were accelerating and braking. It moved behind car 44 and was not in front when the safety car period ended. So that's correct. Like, that part is, this bit isn't really that egregious, because they've said, listen, he has moved in front and there's a rule to say you're not allowed to go in front. Now, what they've done is they've used their sort of discretion and said, all right, he was only in front for a short period of time, slightly in front, both cars were accelerating, braking, and he was behind at the safety car line. It's sort of like, that's not one I would really, like I said, I wouldn't really want that one applied. But going forward, we now need hard and fast rules to explain why this cannot now happen again. Because if this happens again, there's got to be a much stronger penalty. And I think the overall thing to summarize this whole thing is, I think it started in Brazil and it's kind of seen its way. It's kind of come back to bite double, triple, and then quadruple in the last 4 races. Like, Saudi Arabia was a mess. I think everyone saw it as a mess, but the right result happened in the end. Now, this one was a world championship deciding cumulative build-up of decisions that you could find a regulation to kind of justify what happened. And I think the problem with the title decider, everyone really wanted a title decider. I think we've seen the worst of a title decider, is in the worst that can happen in the title decider, in the sense that it ended up in the stewards, and 3 hours after the race had finished, Max wasn't confirmed as world champion, which I think we knew was going to happen at some point, especially with all the controversies that happened. So, kind of be careful what you wish for. I've been saying this all year. Be careful what you wish for. You want a last lap title decider. Almost the only way you're going to get it is if something crazy happens, because as the race played out, Hamilton had the faster car. Even though Perez took 7 seconds out of his lead, he then built it back up to another 11. Virtual safety car came out. Verstappen was on the charge. The time was coming down and down. Hamilton put another charge back on. And then it was like, okay, cool, I've dealt with everything that's come my way from a Hamilton point of view. And then the safety car comes out and they don't apply that rule. They don't apply the safety car rules the way that people would expect. Now, was Hamilton robbed? No, he wasn't robbed. Because as we've seen, you could find a sentence in the regulations that you could apply to clear what everyone had done. The only, again, I think the reason why you can find a thing is because one of them, 15.3, I think it was, literally says the race director can kind of do what he wants. Like, he has overriding authority over the use of safety. Like, he can decide what he wants to do there. So because that rule exists, if that rule didn't exist, it would be difficult to explain why you didn't follow 48.13. Because 48.13, the only reason that the 15.3 allows them to break that 48.13 rule. And because they broke 48.13, they're allowed to do 48, because they broke 48.12, they're allowed to do 48.13. So it's kind of like, it's so, I mean, I've gone round and round, but like, I think everyone, if you're watching, if you've got this far as well, I think you can probably see where things have fallen through the cracks. And from a legal point of view, it's a mess. Like, it is a mess. From a sporting point of view, if we can leave all that behind, because I have pretty much explained every single thing that's happened here so far. At the end of the day, Max Verstappen is a worthy world champion. He's been the best for a long time, but he's been one of the best for a long time. In a way, I'm kind of glad he's got one, because then I guess he won't turn into one of these guys who's the best guy to never win. Like, he's got that one. He's put up with Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes in their prime all year long. All the crashes, all the controversy, all the controversy about his driving style, and he's still, with 1 lap to go, granted he's on fresher tyres, sent it down the inside of Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton didn't do anything about it. I think that is from a racing point of view. If we can focus on just the racing, that was Hamilton's problem throughout a lot of this year, but specifically in this race. Hamilton lost this race on the restart because he didn't defend. Now, if he had defended into turn 4, he'd have probably been out of position. He would have got roasted into turn 6. Now, he would have to defend again going into turn 6. The car was fast enough in a straight line. If he had defended hard, he could have defended into turn 6. Another little chicane. Then there's another defend. He'd have need to defend off of a Red Bull on soft tyres 3 times. Because he gave up that first one, the next 2 he had to attack, and Verstappen had the defence, he had the speed and the tyres. So if you boil it all down, if you take the legality out of it, Hamilton had the faster car and he was dominant. All these things happened, and it was an incredible sequence of things happened, from the Perez thing, the virtual safety car, and then the actual safety car, and then the misapplication of the rules. All of these things, if you take all of that out, you've got a 1-lap showdown between 23 or 44 lap old hard tyres and fresh soft tyres. Now, you've still got a chance. You're still technically, no matter all the other nonsense that's happened, you're still in a 1v1 1-lap race against your rival, and you let him go down the inside. That to me is one thing that Hamilton can't and nobody can kind of dismiss, because he did, no matter what else happened legally, how they applied the rules, he still let him down the inside. Now, whether or not he would have been able to defend the next 3 attacks, we'd never know. But at least defend that one and make it a question. Because if he defended that one, then have gone into turn 6, he'd have had to get his elbows out, as he should, because he's Lewis Hamilton, as he should be trying to defend by now, and it's Max Verstappen. So you know Max Verstappen's going to come down the inside, and you better be ready for it. But he wasn't the first time. He'd also let Perez up the... So Hamilton does deserve, if there is such thing as giving him blame, it's not just the legal thing that's cost him the race. Like, for sure. It's not just the legal thing that's cost Hamilton the race. His driving, he wasn't hard enough. He didn't defend hard enough to Perez. He kind of got away with it because Verstappen was coming up behind him, and Perez had to get out of the way of Verstappen. So that kind of worked in his favour. But yeah, Hamilton, I think next year will obviously be aware of what's going on. I think next year it'll be different from the off. I think he might have got surprised by how tough Verstappen was, if that's even a thing. So if you've made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back, literally, because it's a long video. There's a lot of talking, a lot of graphics, a lot of technical regulations. I've said the numbers 48.13, a world record number of times. So now you know the rule. Next time you watch Formula One, I know there's a lot of you watching who watched it for the first time. I was with many of them here. And you've seen the best and the worst of Formula One in certainly this race, but definitely the last 2 races and even go back to Brazil, the last 4 races, you've seen the best, but you've seen a lot of the worst in Formula One. And I think they've got 3 months now until the 18th of March, when you go to Bahrain, to sort all of this out, because this can't happen again. You can get away with it once, high pressure situation, Max's first championship. That is now expired. So we can't, so the general thing can't be, we need to get Max a world championship going forward. So that's happened. Now it's like, right, cool. Now that Max has got his championship, kind of history has been achieved. Let's sort these rules out so stuff like this doesn't happen again, and the next world championship isn't decided in the stewards room. So we made it to the end. I can't believe when I started the chat, I talked about Bahrain. I mean, that was an incredible race. So going forward, you're going to get, obviously, I'm going to break down the season more generally speaking, in terms, I'm going to break it into sections, because obviously I'm not going to talk about 20 races in one go. My voice won't be able to hack that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do a season recap, because I guess at the beginning I was kind of covering Formula One, but as it's become more of a central focal point, certainly of this channel, I think I'm going to go back and obviously going to watch all the races and give you like my little gems, like I've tried to do here. Hopefully you've enjoyed those. And obviously throughout the winter there's going to be videos coming out. There's a lot of fun videos I've got planned to kind of give some more background, certainly to my knowledge, but certainly into what's happened previously, because everyone can get swept up in just the 2021 season, but all the stuff that's been happening in the past that I've watched, I can now kind of give my insight into. And certainly going into the new season, obviously it's a brand new car. There's going to be new regulations. I'm going to get some videos about that. And I'm going to read, because I actually started reading, I think I got through a quarter of the sporting regulations. The stuff I've been quoting this whole time, I got about 3/4 of the way in. I think it's about 100 pages. Just out of interest, I started reading it. Gonna read all of it and break out some highlights, and obviously when I get to 4812 I'm gonna shed a tear or pour one out for the 4812 and 4813. But yeah, really appreciate you being with me on this journey. Insane. Like you can't, you could not have made this up. Last lap, Lewis v Max, when it's like, I might even watch it again. It's just because I might even watch it again. It's just so incredible. I still can't believe it. And I'm not, again, as you know, I'm a Hamilton fan, but it's just mad. When I see sporting insanity or just greatness and just absolute peak drama, you just have to appreciate it. You can't be bitter about it, you can't be mad about it. You'd hope the rules are being followed as always, and it is a shame for Max that some of the celebrations were kind of derailed. But I think that was fair, because I don't think you could celebrate and just ignore the fact Hamilton had kind of been done dirty that way. And I know I say for a fact, it's hard to say for a fact, but I know if it happened the other way round, it wouldn't be, it'd be ridiculous, it'd be crazy. People would be thinking, how has Hamilton stolen this one from Verstappen, because the FIA have decided 15.8 and 15.9 million. It's crazy. So you're gonna get more videos coming through. Appreciate you sticking with me on this one, and hopefully I've made things a little bit clearer, but I've probably made things more complicated because there's a lot in there. But yeah, peace, appreciate it.